1b. Who is the desolator? Last part of verse 27. 2a. Was Daniel also told it would take 3.5 years for the returned Christ to complete the task of bringing the world into at-one-ment? Daniel 9:27. 2b. What does it mean to confirm the covenant? See comment below. 3a. What was it the Apostle Peter proclaimed was to occur when Jesus Christ returns to earth? Acts 3, verses 19 through 21. Note the words refreshing, restitution. But what is it that is to be the restored? What is it that is to be restored to earth? Why, the government of God. 4. Does Peter also show God's government is to be restored at the same time Satan's part in it to be? Let me start over. Does Peter also show God's government is to be restored at the same time Satan's part in sins is to be transferred to his own head? Acts 3:19. 5. At-one-ment will not be complete with merely putting Satan away. The greatest task will be remaining. People will still be hating and killing each other. Man's mind, man's very nature must be refashioned. His character reshaped and remolded until it becomes at one with God. Then the fully confirmed new covenant will be completed. 5a. What will be the attitude of both Israel and Judah in that time? Jeremiah 31, verses 9 and 34, and chapters 50, verses 4 and 5. Page 8. 5b. Who does God blame for their past sins and wrong attitudes? Verse 6. 5c. Isn't this Azazel's doing through his counterfeit ministers? But in that time, will Israel and Judah have any more sin? Jeremiah 50, verses 20, and Zechariah chapter 3, verse 9. 7. Is this the attitude pictured by fasting on the Day of Atonement? Jeremiah 50, verses 20, and Zechariah chapter 3, verse 9. Check verse reference. 8a. Will the 12 nations or tribes of Israel have any more disagreements or jealousies of one another? Isaiah 11, verse 13. 8b. Will they then cooperate to convert Gentile nations to the government of God? Verse 14. Also Romans 11, verses 12 and 15. 9. And seeing Israel's right example, will Gentile nations willingly, of their own volition, seek to God's nation for the way of peace and at-one-ment? Deuteronomy 4, verse 6. See also Ephesians 2, verses 4 through 16. Check last line verse reference. 10. What will the Gentiles say when they have learned the truth and realize at last how the father of lies, John 8:44, has deceived them? Will they forsake the ways of their ancestors? Jeremiah 16:19. Section G. New Testament Church kept Day of Atonement. 1. Did the Apostle Paul tell us God's holy days foreshadow events to come? Illustrate the plan of God in advance. Colossians 2, verses 16 and 17. Note the proper translation of verse 17 is that God's days foreshadow good things to come. 2. Did the New Testament church keep the Day of Atonement? Acts 27, verse 9. Section H. Why we must keep the fast today. 1a. Was the Day of Atonement chosen as the beginning of the time of release? Does this make it obvious that the purpose of this day is to symbolize release from bondage? Leviticus 25, verses 9 and 10. Page 9. 2. Why is it necessary for there to be a day of at-one-ment? Isaiah 59, verse 2, and Psalm 66, verse 18. 3a. The Old Testament observances so far studied were ritualistic. Only the high priest and a few assistants were involved in performing them. But the whole population or congregation of Israel has a part of its own to play. That part is to fast and abstain from work on the Day of Atonement. Leviticus 23, verses 29 through 32. (3b) Does it say forever and through your generations and in all your dwellings? Leviticus 23, verses 29 through 32. (3c) What does the act of fasting indicate? Sorrow because of sin? Ezra 10, verse 6, and Deuteronomy chapter 9, verses 8, 9, and 18. Four. Isn't the Bible example of spiritual fasting always to go without water as well as food? Same verse. And also Exodus 34, verse 28, and Esther chapter 4, verse 16, and Acts 9, verse 9. 5. Is it through the minor affliction of fasting that we become one with Christ, who suffered so tremendously for us that we might become at one with God? Isaiah 53, verses 4 and 7. The same Hebrew word Anah, A-N-A-H, is used here that is used for fasting, afflicting the soul. 6. Does this fast day serve to keep us in remembrance of what we are at present? Flesh. Isaiah 44, 8, 12. Doesn't the Day of Atonement fast also tell us how much our lives, our actions, and our thoughts are taken up with self? When will we get hungry? When we get hungry and we suddenly find that we are still very carnal minded, how spiritual minded are you? 8a. Carnal nature tends to become exalted, puffed up, in its own sinful ways. How did David control the tendency to become arrogant? Psalm 35, verse 13, and Psalm 109, verse 24, and Psalm 119, verse 71. 8b. On what kind of man will God look with favor? A humble man? Isaiah 66, verse 2. Atonement Day cuts us down and lets us know how small and weak we are. Page 10. 9a. Did Jesus teach that he who humbles himself shall be exalted? Luke 14, verse 11. 8b. And that no one can be accepted of God until he becomes humble. Luke 18, 14. 10. What else does the act of fasting picture to us? Isaiah 40, verses 28 through 30. Isaiah 40, verses 28 through 31. 11a. In addition, the commandments to observe the fast of the Day of Atonement is a test commandment to see if we will obey or not. How does James say we will receive the ability to withstand Satan during this life? James 4, verses 6, 7, and 10. Surely humbling ourselves, resisting Satan, and submitting to God is symbolic of how we will be able to replace him as world ruler. 11b. Does Mark 9:29 also show how God's servants received the necessary power to cast out demons? 11c. Is it by fasting? Mark 9, verse 29.